Hey, welcome back to the eDrum Workshop. I'm Luke and I hope you're having a great day. I've got a set of Jobeky Prestige 3-ply mesh heads here, so today we're going to find out how these stack up against the competition. As always with reviews, full disclosure, Jobeky sent me this set of 3-ply mesh heads free of charge and I'm able to keep them. But I wasn't asked to make this video and of course I'm free to say whatever I like about them. They sent me 12, 13, 14 and 16 inch heads which I'm using on a 13-inch snare drum, 12 and 14 inch toms and my 16 inch converted kick drum. And before we even get into the performance of these heads, the design I really like. There's just a small Jobeky logo up at the top of the heads, a logo which I think looks perfectly fine and pleasant, and that's it. This might be to your liking or it might not. I know that in the past they didn't have any logos on their mesh heads, they were just plain white. And although I do like a clean look, absolutely no logo can sometimes look a little bit cheaper, or maybe that's just me. As far as my experience goes with other brands of 3-ply mesh heads, I used Roland's 3-ply head that came on the digital snare for a good while before I accidentally snagged it and destroyed it in transport. I've used a 13-inch and a couple of 14-inch drum-tec real feel heads on a few different drums, and I've also used various sizes of the SpareDrum Mute 3-ply mesh heads which I did a review of a while ago. And as I said in that review video, I couldn't really differentiate between the drum-tec real feels or the SpareDrum Mute 3-ply heads. They both felt very similar, and I can add Jobeky's 3-ply mesh heads into that same category. As soon as I got them out of the box and their simple plastic sleeves, I was taken aback by just how much these feel exactly like the drum-tec real feel heads, and of course by extension the SpareDrum Mute 3-ply heads. The opacity of the heads, the feel in the hand, the hoops and the trim, the loose bottom ply, they're very similar, and in a blind test I wouldn't know the difference. Now if you haven't used a drum-tec real feel or a SpareDrum head before, so you've not got a frame of reference, the feel of those heads is reasonably thick because of the 3 plies, and the 3rd ply on the bottom is actually loose, which is what gives them that more acoustic-like feel and rebound when you really lay into them, because that layer helps dampen it compared to a 2-ply head. And these Jobeky heads are exactly the same in feel and function. They perform really well when I tighten them up to my preferred tensions, and the trigger response that I get out of them tracks exactly the same as any other heads that I've used. Compared to Roland's 2-ply heads that come as a standard on the majority of their drums, these Jobeky heads definitely have less of that trampoline or tennis racket style feel that a lot of people report to get from Roland heads. Personally, I quite like Roland's 2-ply heads. I feel like they've got a good thwack when you sort of lay into them, but overall 3-ply heads still do fit my preferred playing style, especially when it comes to the lighter dynamics. The 3-ply heads that Roland supply on their VAD 14-inch toms and the digital snare drum are designed a bit differently. There's a completely free-floating middle ply in their heads. However, from what I remember of using that particular head on my digital snare, it performs very similarly to these Jobeky heads. If you've ever used cheaper 3-ply heads like the ZXX heads, these Jobeky heads have a much more solid feel than they do. And for any of you that are used to using Alesis 2-ply heads, once again I also prefer a 3-ply head on their pads. The difference in the feel is a bit less pronounced than it is when you change out a Roland head for a 3-ply head, because Alesis put additional foam towers in their pads which helps dampen the rebound. But personally I still think there's an improvement to be found by swapping their 2-ply heads for 3-plies like these Jobeky heads. So performance-wise, I love these heads. They're easily on par with any of the other premium 3-ply heads that I've used, and I've had loads of fun playing on them. And I was even quite surprised to find that I enjoyed the feel of the kick drum head too. I've used a drum-tec Pro mesh head on my kick drum for quite a long time now, and it's a really thick 1-ply mesh head. So far that's the most acoustic-like mesh head that I've used. It's very close to Mylar in feel, but it's also very loud. When I first installed the Jobeky head on my kick drum, I found it a little bit springy compared to the drum-tec Pro. However, when I backed off the tension a little bit and I added a patch, it became very close. For the majority of people, those drum-tec Pro heads would be way too loud for home use, so something like this would be a much better choice. One other thing of note about my kick drum conversion is that I've got a big foam cylinder in there. I bought it from eDrums a few years ago and it's one of their KD120 replacement foam cushions. This makes a big difference to the feel of the head and the rebound of the beaters, so do bear that in mind. So let's talk about the noise levels next. There's always quite a lot of interest in this particular topic when people are looking at replacing their mesh heads. Of course, we want to improve the playability of our pads if we can, but we also want to try and avoid increasing the volume if we can help it. And obviously this isn't particularly easy to demonstrate on video. I can only really show off the relative volumes compared to some other mesh heads and some other pads. So with that in mind, my 13-inch snare drum is currently fitted with a drone halo trigger, and here's a comparison between the drum-tec real feel head and the Jobeky Prestige 3-ply head on that drum. Generally speaking, there's not really much between the two. The Jobeky head has a slightly less thuddy quality and maybe a tiny little bit more buzz, but I didn't really do an accurate tension test, so there might have been a slight difference between them. I just went off feel. I do also have a 12-inch drum with a Jobeky center mount trigger installed. Unfortunately, I still had a 12-inch Roland head knocking around that I could compare the Jobeky head to on that drum. Surprisingly, compared to the Jobeky head, the Roland's actually coming out a bit lower and thuddier, but a little bit of extra buzz on the Jobeky head aside, there's not really much in it. The difference in volume for other people in your house or your neighbours is probably going to be pretty minimal, especially compared to that of your kick drum pad or your hi-hat pedal. Speaking of which, the kick drum. As expected, the Jobeky head is way quieter, even with the patch on, but I would imagine that most of you won't be swapping between these two heads. So in that vein, here's the volume of my KD8 kick pad to compare to. And I also thought it might be useful to hear these pads in context with rubber cymbals and the clomping of my pedals. So hopefully that gives you some kind of idea of what the relative volumes might be like compared to whatever gear you're using. These heads are also priced pretty well compared to the competition. They're cheaper than Roland's 2-ply heads in the UK, at least for a start. And of course it's going to depend on your location as to whether or not these end up being cheaper than another head like the drum-tec Real Feels. Looking at the current conversion rates for me in the UK, the Jobeky heads are a few pounds cheaper per head, and depending on the size of your order, importing from Europe can now end up a little bit more costly. Exactly how that translates to every other country with conversion rates, shipping costs and local taxes is difficult to say, so you might need to do some shopping around. It appears that the SpareDrum Mute 3-ply heads are still the cheapest of these options. However, going off the comments from my review video, it seems that their availability in different regions can be really hit or miss. Jobeky do ship worldwide, so depending on where you are, that might end up being the more favourable option. So overall, I think these heads are great. They're easily on par with the best of the best that I've tried so far. I really can't differentiate between these, the drum-tecs and the SpareDrums, and I'll be leaving these ones on my kit because I really like how they look. So if you're looking to upgrade to 3-ply heads and these are within your budget, then I don't think you can really go wrong. If you enjoyed this review or you found it useful, don't forget to pop a like on it, subscribe to the channel for more reviews and electronic drum related content, and don't forget to check out my store at the edrumworkshop.com for new kits and samples for your electronic drum module. And above all, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!